What is a requirement of all marine transmitting apparatus used aboard U.S. vessels? Equipment must be certified by the FCC for Part 80 operations. What transmitting equipment is authorized for use by a station in the maritime services? Unless specifically accepted, only transmitters certified by the FCC for Part 80 operations. Small passenger vessels that sail 20 to 150 nautical miles from the nearest land must have what additional equipment? MFHFSSB transceiver. What equipment is programmed to initiate transmission of distress alerts and calls to individual stations? DSC controller. What is the minimum transmitter power level required by the FCC for a medium-frequency transmitter aboard a compulsorily fitted vessel? At least 60 watts PEP. Shipboard transmitters using F3E emissions may not exceed what carrier power? 25 watts. Which commercial radio operator license is required to operate a fixed-tune ship radar station with external controls? No radio operator authorization is required. When is a marine radio operator permit or higher license required for race sea communications? When operating on frequencies below 30 MHz not allocated exclusively to aeronautical mobile services. Which of the following persons are ineligible to be issued a commercial radio operator license? Individuals who are unable to send and receive correctly by telephone spoken messages in English. What are the radio operator requirements of a passenger ship equipped with a GMDSS installation? 2 operators on board must hold a GMDSS radio operator license or a restricted GMDSS radio operator license depending on the ship's operating area. What is the minimum radio operator requirement for ships subject to the Great Lakes Radio Agreement? Marine Radio Operator Permit. What is a requirement of every commercial operator on duty and in charge of a transmitting system? The original license or a photocopy must be posted or in the operator's personal possession and available for inspection. Radio watches for compulsory radio telephone stations will include the following. VHF Channel 16 Continuous Watch. All compulsory equipped cargo ships while being navigated outside of harbor or port shall keep a continuous radio telephone watch on 2182 kHz and CH16. What channel must all compulsory non-GMDSS vessels monitor at all times in the open sea? Channel 16. When a watch is required on 2182 kHz, at how many minutes past the hour must a 3-minute silence be observed? 0030. Which is true concerning a required watch on VHF CH16? Which is true concerning a required watch on VHF CH16? What are the mandatory DSC watch-keeping bands channels? 8 MHz HFDSE, 1 other HFDSE, 2 MHz MFDSE, and VHF CH70. Who is required to make entries in a required service or maintenance log? The operator responsible for the station operation or maintenance. Who is responsible for the proper maintenance of station logs? The station licensee and the radio operator in charge of the station. Where must ship station logs be kept during a voyage? At the principal radio telephone operating position. What is the proper procedure for making a correction in the station log? The original person making the entry must strike out the error, initial the correction and indicate the date of the correction. How long should station logs be maintained when there are entries relating to distress or disaster situations? For a period of 3 years from the last date of entry unless notified by the FCC. How long should station logs be retained when there are no entries relating to distress or disaster situations? For a period of 2 years from the last date of entry. Radio telephone stations required to keep logs of their transmissions must include A. Station, date and time. B. Name of operator on duty. C. Station call signs with which communication took place. D. All of these. Which of the following is true? A. Battery test must be logged daily. B. EPIRB tests are normally logged monthly. C. Radiotelephone tests are normally logged weekly. D. None of the above. Where should the GMDSS radio log be kept on board ship? At the GMDSS operating station. Where should the GMDSS radio log be kept on board ship? At the GMDSS operating station. Which of the following statements concerning the GMDSS radio logbook is true? A. Key letters or abbreviations may be used in GMDSS radio logbooks if their meaning is noted in the log. B. Key letters or abbreviations may not be used in GMDSS radio logbooks under any circumstance. C. All urgency communications must be entered in the logbook. D. None of the above. Which of the following log-keeping statements is true?
A. Entries related to pre-voyage, pre-departure, and daily tests are required. B. Both A and C are correct. C. Summary of all required distress communications heard and urgency communications affecting the station's own ship. Also, all safety communications, other than VHF, affecting own station ship must be logged. D. Routine daily MFHF and Inmersat-C transmissions do not have to be logged.
Which of the following statements concerning log entries is false? All safety communications received on VHF must be logged. What regulations govern the use and operation of FCC licensed ship stations in international waters? Part 80 of the FCC rules plus the international radio regulations and agreements to which the U.S. is a party. When may the operator of a ship radio station allow an unlicensed person to speak over the transmitter? When under the supervision of the licensed operator. Where do you make an application for inspection of a ship GMDSS radio station? To the engineer in charge of the FCC district office nearest the proposed place of inspection. Who has ultimate control of service at a ship's radio station? The master of the ship. Where must the principal radiotelephone operation position be installed in a ship station? In the room or an adjoining room from which the ships normally steered while at sea. By international agreement, which ships must carry radio equipment for the safety of life at sea? Cargo ships of more than 300 gross tons and vessels carrying more than 12 passengers. What traffic management service is operated by the U.S. Coast Guard in certain designated water areas to prevent ship collisions, groundings, and environmental harm? Vessel Traffic Service. What is a bridge-to-bridge station? A VHF radio station located on a ship's navigational bridge or main control station that is used only for navigational communications. When may a bridge-to-bridge transmission be more than 1 watt? When broadcasting a distress message and rounding a bend in a river or traveling in a blind spot. When is it legal to transmit high power on CH-13? A. Failure of vessel being called to respond. B. In a blind situation such as rounding a bend in a river. C. During an emergency. D. All of these. A ship station using VHF bridge-to-bridge CH-13 may be identified by the name of the ship in lieu of a call sign. The primary purpose of bridge-to-bridge communications is navigational communications. What is the best way for a radio operator to minimize or prevent interference to other stations? Determine that a frequency is not in use before transmitting. Under what circumstances may a coast station using telephony transmit a general call to a group of vessels? When announcing or preceding the transmission of distress, urgency, safety, or other important messages. Who determines when a ship station may transmit routine traffic destined for a coast or government station in the Maritime Mobile Service? Ship stations must comply with instructions given by the coast or government station. What is required of a ship station which has established initial contact with another station on 2182 kHz or CH-16? The stations must change to an authorized working frequency for the transmission of messages. How does a coast station notify a ship that it has a message for the ship? The coast station may transmit at intervals lists of call signs in alphabetical order for which they have traffic. What is the priority of communications? Distress, urgency, safety. Under what circumstances may a ship or aircraft station interfere with a public coast station? In cases of distress. Ordinarily, how often would a station using a telephony emission identify? At the beginning and end of each transmission and 15-minute intervals. When using your SSB station on 2182 kHz or VHF FM on CH16, a preliminary call must not exceed 30 seconds. B. If contact is not made, you must wait at least 2 minutes before repeating the call. C. Once contact is established, you must switch to a working frequency. D. All of these. What should a station operator do before making a transmission? Except for transmission of distress calls, determine that the frequency is not in use by monitoring the frequency before transmitting. On what frequency should a ship station normally call a coast station when using a radiotelephony emission? Calls should be initiated on the appropriate ship-to-shore working frequency of the coast station. In the International Phonetic Alphabet, the letters E, M, and S are represented by the words Echo, Mike, Sierra. What information must be included in a distress message? A. Name of vessel. B. Location. C. Type of distress and specifics of help requested. D. All of the above. What are the highest priority communications from ships at sea? Distress calls are highest and then communications preceded by urgency and then safety signals. What is a distress communication? An internationally recognized communication indicating that the sender is threatened by grave and imminent danger and requests immediate assistance. What is the order of priority of radiotelephone communications in the maritime service? Distress calls and signals, followed by communications preceded by urgency and safety signals and all other communications. The radiotelephone distress call and message consists of
A. Mayday spoken 3 times, followed by the name of the vessel, and the call sign in phonetics spoken 3 times. B. Particulars of its position, latitude, and longitude, and other information which might facilitate rescue, such as length, color, and type of vessel, and number of persons on board. C. Nature of distress and kind of assistance required. D. All of the above.
what is distress traffic? All messages relative to the immediate assistance required by a ship, aircraft, or other vehicle threatened by grave or imminent danger, such as life and safety of persons on board or man overboard. What is a typical urgency transmission? A request for medical assistance that does not rise to the level of a distress or critical weather transmission higher than safety. What is the internationally recognized urgency call? The words PAN spoken 3 times before the urgency call. What is a safety transmission? A communications transmission which indicates that a station is preparing to transmit an important navigation or weather warning. The urgency signal concerning the safety of a ship, aircraft, or other person shall be sent only on the authority of the master of the ship or person responsible for mobile station. The urgency signal has lower priority than distress. What safety signal call word is spoken 3 times, followed by the station call letter spoken 3 times to announce a storm warning, danger to navigation, or special aid to navigation? Seek your right. Seek your right. What is the fundamental concept of the GMDSS? It is intended to automate and improve emergency communications in the maritime industry. The primary purpose of the GMDSS is to automate and improve emergency communications for the world shipping industry. What is the basic concept of GMDSS? A shoreside authorities and vessels can assist in a coordinated SAR operation with minimum delay. B. Search and rescue authorities ashore can be alerted to a distress situation. C. Shipping in the immediate vicinity of a ship in distress will be rapidly alerted. D. All of these. GMDSS is primarily a system based on the linking of search and rescue authorities ashore with shipping in the immediate vicinity of a ship in distress or in need of assistance. What is the responsibility of vessels under GMDSS? Every ship is able to perform those communication functions that are essential for the safety of the ship itself and other ships. GMDSS is required for which of the following? A. All vessels capable of international voyage. B. SOLAS convention ships of 300 gross tonnage or more. C. Vessels operating outside of the range of VHF coastal radio stations. D. Coastal vessels of less than 300 gross tons. What is the purpose of the INT-USA control settings on a VHF? To change certain international duplex channel assignments to simplex in the US for VTS and other purposes. VHF ship station transmitters must have the capability of reducing carrier power to 1 watt. The dual watch function is used to listen on any selected channel while periodically monitoring CH16. Which of the following statements best describes the correct setting for manual adjustment of the squelch control? Adjust squelch control to the minimum level necessary to barely suppress any background noise. The scan function is used to sequentially scan all or selected channels. Why must all VHF distress, urgency, and safety communications be performed in simplex operating mode? To ensure that vessels not directly participating in the communications can hear both sides of the radio exchange. What channel must VHF FM-equipped vessels monitor at all times when the vessel is at sea? Channel 16. What is the aircraft frequency and emission used for distress communications? 121 MHz A3. Which VHF channel is used only for digital selective calling? Channel 70. Which channel is utilized for the required bridge-to-bridge watch? VHF FM on CH13 in most areas of the continental US. Which channel would most likely be used for routine ship-to-ship voice traffic? CH08. What channel would you use to place a call to a short telephone? CH28. Which modes could be selected to receive vessel traffic list from high seas shore station, SSB and FEC? Why must all MFHF distress, urgency, and safety communications take place solely on the 6 assigned frequencies and in the simplex operating mode?
A. For non-GMDSS ships, to maximize the chances for other vessels to receive those communications. B, A, and C are both correct. C. For GMDSS or DSC equipped ships, to maximize the chances for other vessels to receive those communications following the transmission of a DSC call of the correct priority. D. To enable an RCC or coast station to only hear communications from the vessel actually in distress.
To set up the MFHF transceiver for a voice call to a coast station, the operator must select J3E mode for proper voice operations. MFHF transceiver power levels should be set to the lowest level necessary for effective communication. To set up the MFHF transceiver for a telex call to a coast station, the operator must select F1B mode or J2B mode depending on the equipment manufacturer. What is the purpose of the receiver incremental tuning or clarifier control? It acts as a fine-tune control on the receive frequency. On what frequency would vessel normally call another ship station when using a radio telephony emission? Ontario 2182 kHz or CH16 unless the station knows that the call vessel maintains a simultaneous watch on another intership working frequency. What is the MF radio telephony calling and distress frequency? 2182 kHz. For general communication purposes, paired frequencies are normally used with public host stations. What emission must be used when operating on the MF distress and calling voice frequency? J3E single sideband telephony. Which of the following defines high-frequency ITU channel 1212? The 12th channel in the 12 MHz band. For general communications purposes, simplex frequencies are A. Normally used between ship stations and private coast stations. B. Normally used with public coast stations. C. Normally used between ship stations. D. Both A and C are correct. What is the proper procedure for testing a radiotelephone installation? Transmit the station's call sign followed by the word test on the frequency being used for the test. When testing is conducted on 2182 kHz or CH16, testing should not continue for more than blank in any 5-minute period. 10 seconds. Under GMDSS, a compulsory VHF-DSC radiotelephone installation must be tested at what minimum intervals at C? Daily. The best way to test the MFHF-NBDP system is initiate an ARQ call to a coast station and wait for the automatic exchange of answer backs. The best way to test an Inmarsat C terminal is compose and send a brief message to your own Inmarsat C terminal. When may you test a radiotelephone transmitter on the air? At any time as necessary to assure proper operations. Under normal circumstances, what do you do if the transmitter aboard your ship is operating off frequency, overmodulating or distorting? Stop transmitting. Which would be an indication of proper operation of a SSB transmitter rated at 60 watt PEP output. Insider communications, the power meter can be seen fluctuating regularly from 0 to the 60 watt relative output reading. If a ship radio transmitter signal becomes distorted, cease operations. What would be an indication of a malfunction on a GMDSS station with a 24 VDC battery system? A constant 30-volt reading on the GMDSS console voltmeter. Your antenna tuner becomes totally inoperative. What would you do to obtain operation on both the 8 MHz and 22 MHz frequency bands? Bypass the antenna tuner. Use a straight whip or wire antenna approximately 30 feet long. Which of the following conditions would be a symptom of malfunction in a 2182 kHz radiotelephone system that must be reported to the master, then logged appropriately? No indication of power output when speaking into the microphone. What are the antenna requirements of a VHF telephony coast, maritime utility or ship station? The shore or onboard antenna must be vertically polarized. What is the antenna requirement of a radiotelephone installation aboard a passenger vessel? The antenna must be vertically polarized and as non-directional and efficient as is practicable for the transmission and reception of ground waves over seawater. What is the most common type of antenna for GMDSS VHF? A. Horizontally polarized circular antenna. B. Long wire antenna. C. Both of the above. D. None of the above. What is the purpose of the antenna tuner? It alters the electrical characteristics of the antenna to match the frequency in use. What advantage does a vertical whip have over a long wire? It radiates equally well in all directions. A vertical whip antenna has a radiation pattern best described by a circle. For small passenger vessel inspection, reserve power batteries must be tested at intervals not exceeding 12 months or during the inspection. What are the characteristics of the reserve source of energy under GMDSS? Must be independent of the ship's electrical system when the RSE is needed to supply power to the GMDSS equipment. Which of the following terms is defined as a backup power source that provides power to radio installations for the purpose of conducting distress and safety communications when the vessel's main and emergency generators cannot? Reserve source of energy. In the event of failure of the main and emergency sources of electrical power, what is the term for the source required to supply the GMDSS console with power for conducting distress and other radio communications? Reserve source of energy. For small passenger vessel inspection, reserve power batteries must be tested at intervals not exceeding 12 months or during the inspection. What are the characteristics of the reserve source of energy under GMDSS? Must be independent of the ship's electrical system when the RSE is needed to supply power to the GMDSS equipment. Which of the following terms is a backup power source that provides power to radio installations for the purpose of conducting distress and safety communications when the vessel's main and emergency generators cannot? Reserve source of energy. What is the requirement for emergency and reserve power in GMDSS radio installations? All newly constructed ships under GMDSS must have both emergency and reserve power sources for radio communications. What is the meaning of reserve source of energy? The supply of electrical energy sufficient enough to operate radio installations for the purpose of conducting distress and safety communications in the event of failure of the ship's main and emergency sources of electrical power. What is an EPIRB? A battery-operated emergency position indicating beacon that floats free of a sinking ship. When are EPIRB batteries changed? After emergency use or within the month and year replacement date printed on the EPIRB. If a ship sinks, what device is designated to float free of the mothership is turned on automatically and transmits a distress signal? An EPIRB. How do you cancel a false EPIRB distress alert? Notify the Coast Guard or Rescue Coordination Center at once. What is the COSPA-SARSAT system? An international satellite-based search and rescue system. What is an advantage of a 406 MHz satellite EPIRB method for the Coast Guard?
A. It is compatible with COSPA's SARSAT satellites and Global Maritime Distress Safety System (GMDSS) regulations. B. Provides a fast, accurate method for the Coast Guard to locate and rescue persons in distress. C. Includes a digitally encoded message containing the ship's identity and nationality. D. All of the above.
In which frequency band does a search and rescue transponder operate? 9 GHz. How should the signal from a search and rescue radar transponder appear on a radar display? A series of 12 equally spaced dots. What is the purpose of the SART's audible tone alarm? It informs survivors that assistance may be nearby. Which statement is true regarding the SART? This is a 9 GHz transponder capable of being received by a vessel's X-band navigational radar system. At what point does a SART begin transmitting? If it has been placed in the on position, it will respond when it has been interrogated by a 9 GHz radar signal. How can a SART's effective range be maximized? The SART should be held as high as possible. Which statement is not true regarding the requirements of survival craft portable 2-way VHF radio telephone equipment? Operate simplex on CH70 and at least one other channel. Which statement is not true regarding the requirements of survival craft portable 2-way VHF radio telephone equipment? Operation on CH13. With what other stations may portable survival craft transceivers communicate? A. Communication is permitted between survival craft. B. Communication is permitted between survival craft and ship. C. Communication is permitted between survival craft and rescue unit. D. All of the above. Equipment for radio telephony use in survival craft stations under GMDSS must have what capability? Operation on CH16. Equipment for radio telephony use in survival craft stations under GMDSS must have what characteristic? A. Operation on CH16. B. Watertight. C. Permanently affixed antenna. D. All of these. What is the minimum power of the SCT? 1 watt. Navtex broadcasts are sent in categories of messages indicated by a single letter or identifier. MSI can be obtained by one of the following: A. Navtex. B. Safety Net. C. HFNB. DPD. All of the above. Which of the following is the primary frequency that is used exclusively for Navtex broadcasts? 518 kHz. What means are used to prevent the reception of unwanted broadcasts by vessels utilizing the Navtex system? Programming the receiver to reject unwanted broadcasts. When do Navtex broadcasts typically achieve maximum transmitting range? Middle of the night. What is the transmitting range of most Navtex stations? Typically 200 to 400 nautical miles.